Her bare feet tore through the brittle grass, each blade slicing at her skin until thin streaks of blood marked her trail. Claire was running for her life. Her dress, once whole, hung in tatters, shredded by the same men who had left her beaten and broken. Bruises mottled her body, and every step set her wounds aflame. Her lungs burned as she gulped air, each breath cutting into her chest like a blade. Above her, the sun reigned merciless over the Wild West plain, its heat blinding and cruel. Dust clung to her tangled hair, sweat stung her eyes, and behind her, somewhere back there, echoed faint, mocking laughter, the sound of men who would rather see her dead than free. Her heart slammed against her ribs so hard it threatened to burst. Claire stumbled down a slope, scraping her knees against hard earth. The pain barely registered anymore. Worse than the cuts and bruises was the hollow despair gnawing at her spirit. There was no escape for a girl like her, sold like cattle, used as property, beaten until her soul splintered. She knew that if they caught her now, she wouldn't live through the night. Then she saw it, a flicker of silver in the distance. Water, a narrow river cutting across the parched land. Her cracked lips parted, whispering to no one. Maybe she could lose them there. Maybe she could vanish in the current. Claire pushed herself harder, her shredded dress clinging to her battered body. She reached the riverbank and didn't pause. She leapt, the water striking her with 1,000 icy knives. The current dragged at her, soaking the last remnants of cloth, leaving her exposed and raw. Her arms felt heavy, weak as she fought to keep her head above the swirling surface. Her mind drifted to her mother, long gone. To the childhood stolen from her, and then to death. Maybe it would be easier than going back to that house of torment. Her eyes snapped open. Through the blur of tears and river water, she saw a horse. A rider moved along the opposite bank, broad-shouldered, gray hair beneath a worn hat. His horse stepped slow, its hooves crushing dry grass. Claire froze. For one terrible heartbeat, she thought he was one of them, the men who had beaten her bloody and cast her to the wolves. Her heart sank like a stone. There was no escape after all. She pressed her arms to her chest, trembling with terror as the river lapped at her shoulders, washing blood from her bruises. Her voice cracked when she cried out, "Just kill me fast!" The words broke in the air, raw and desperate. Tears streamed down her face. "I'd rather die than go back." The rider tugged on his reins. His horse stopped just a few steps from the water's edge. The man leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he studied her. He didn't draw a gun. He didn't bark orders. He simply stared, silent, still. And in his eyes wasn't the cruelty of a hunter. It was something else, something Claire had not expected. Who was this man? Why did he not move? And what would he do with a broken girl who begged for death instead of mercy? The old rancher remained on his horse for a long moment, his gaze locked on the shivering figure in the river. She looked like a ghost, not a living soul. At last he swung down from the saddle and stepped toward the water. "Easy now," he said quietly. "I ain't here to hurt you." Claire's lips quivered. She hugged herself tighter, trying to cover the bruises and torn fabric clinging to her body. Her eyes flicked around, still expecting to see men chasing her. But there was only this stranger with gray hair and a worn, tired face. Something in his voice didn't sound like the cruel laughter she'd fled. It was steady, almost gentle. He crouched at the edge of the river. "What happened to you, girl?" At first Claire said nothing. Then the words spilled out of her like the river's current. She told him how she'd been taken to a house of shame in town, bought like livestock. How they'd forced her to serve men she didn't know. When she refused, they beat her until she couldn't stand. Every no brought more pain. So tonight she ran, not caring if she lived or died. Ethan listened without blinking. His name was Ethan Cole, though she didn't yet know it. He had once been feared across the frontier, not as a gunman, but as the man who managed one of the most notorious houses himself. He had made his fortune off the misery of women like Claire. He had lived in sin until tragedy came for him. Years ago, his only daughter had been taken by a rival gang. She was Claire's age, maybe younger. When they killed her, Ethan's heart had broken clean in two. He'd left that filthy trade behind, swearing never to touch it again. Since then, he'd lived alone on his ranch, raising horses, trying to forget. As Claire's story spilled into the dry air, Ethan's jaw clenched. It was like hearing his own daughter's cries all over again. His chest ached with guilt, a weight he bore every day. He knew exactly what those men had done to Claire. She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "I should have died out there," she whispered. "They won't stop until they drag me back." Ethan looked at her a long while. His weathered face was hard to read, but his voice came low and firm. "Not if I got anything to say about it." For the first time in years, Claire felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt: hope. But out here in the Wild West, hope was fragile, and when word spread that Ethan Cole was hiding a runaway, trouble wouldn't be far behind. The question was clear. When those men came knocking, what choice would Ethan make? That evening, the ranch was quiet. Ethan had given Claire a blanket in a corner of the barn to rest. She slept at last, pale under the lantern's glow. Ethan sat nearby on a stool, sharpening his old Colt revolver, a habit he thought he'd left behind. The night air carried an eerie stillness. Too still, the kind of quiet that makes a man's skin crawl. Then came the sound of hooves, slow, deliberate, crunching dry earth. Ethan stepped outside. 2 riders approached the ranch gate. Hard faces, cold eyes. One bore a scar running from ear to jaw. The other chewed on a toothpick, spitting it into the dirt as he saw Ethan. "Evening, old man," the scarred one said. "We heard you might be keeping something don't belong to you." Ethan kept his hands at his sides. "I don't know what you're talking about." The toothpick man grinned. She ran off from the house. "You know how it is. Girls get ideas. But we gotta bring her back, or the boss will make sure nobody else tries it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I reckon you ought to ride on out of here." The scarred man leaned forward in his saddle. "You forget who you're talking to." "We know who you are, Cole. We remember when you ran the best house in town. You think hiding one girl's gonna fix all that?" Ethan's eyes darkened. Slowly he reached for the revolver at his side. The metal caught the moonlight as he cocked the hammer back. "I said ride out." The toothpick man's grin faded. Both riders exchanged a glance. They knew the stories. Ethan Cole was no ordinary rancher. He had been a viper once, and a viper's fangs never truly dull. The scarred man spat into the dirt. "This ain't over." He yanked on his reins, and the 2 horses wheeled around, vanishing into the night. Ethan stood there, revolver steady until the sound of hooves was gone. Then he lowered it, his heart thudding harder than he liked to admit. Inside the barn, Claire stirred in her sleep, unaware how close danger had crept. Ethan knew this was only the beginning. If word spread further, more men would come, and next time they wouldn't back down so easy. By morning, Claire awoke, restless, ready to run again. But Ethan shook his head. "Running won't fix it. They'll track you no matter how far you go." Her eyes widened. "Then what do we do?" Ethan rubbed his chin, weighing the options. There was only one man who could intervene, at least temporarily: Harlan Briggs. In the past, Ethan had done plenty of grim work alongside him. Harlan was cunning, ruthless when necessary, and most importantly, powerful. He had allies in town halls, sheriffs in his pocket. If Harlan decreed a girl untouchable, even the meanest gangs hesitated. Ethan saddled his horse and helped Claire mount behind him. She clung to his waist as they rode across endless stretches of open land. The sky stretched wide above them, but Ethan felt the walls closing in. Every beat of their horses' hooves was a reminder that his past was catching up. By midday, they reached the town, a dusty, noisy place teeming with wagons, merchants, and drunken men spilling from saloons. Ethan guided his horse down a narrow alley to a large brick building. No sign hung above it, but everyone in town knew who held dominion there. This was Harlan's seat of power. Inside, the air was thick with smoke. Men played cards, others counted coins, but all made way when Ethan stepped through the door. Years had passed, yet his name still carried weight. Claire stayed close, eyes darting nervously at every shadow. At the far end, Harlan Briggs sat, silver-haired but still solid, eyes sharp as knives. He leaned back, a slow grin on his face. "Well, well, if it ain't Ethan Cole. Thought you were dead." Ethan squared his shoulders. "I need your help." "There's a girl. They won't let her go." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "Why should I care about one girl?" "You think you can just stroll in after all these years and ask favors?" The room fell silent. Ethan did not flinch. He met Harlan's gaze. "You owe me." "And you damn well know it." The grin faded. Harlan leaned forward, drumming his fingers on the table. The men around shifted uneasily. Finally, Harlan let out a short laugh. "All right, Cole, I'll hear you out. But what I do with you and that girl depends on how this story ends." The question lingered. Would Harlan truly protect Claire, or hand her over to the devils pursuing her? Tension filled the room as Ethan waited. Harlan gave a slow nod. "All right, Cole, the girl will be left alone. But this is the last time I pull your weight." Relief washed over Claire. For the first time since her escape, the chains of fear slackened. Ethan nodded once, jaw firm. Harlan's promise was not kindness, it was business, a debt repaid. And sometimes business was enough. Enough for Claire to imagine a life beyond the shadows. Enough for Ethan to believe, if only for a moment, that his past sins didn't have to define him. Stepping back into the open street, Claire turned to him. "Why did you help me?" Ethan's eyes softened, though his voice remained rough. "Because I once lost someone like you, and I won't let it happen again." They rode back across the wide plain as the sun sank behind the horizon, the sky ablaze with red and gold. Claire leaned against him, breathing steady at last. For Ethan, the sound of her calm was worth more than all the gold he had once taken in his darker days. He knew it wouldn't last forever. The Wild West never let a man rest too long. But saving one broken soul was enough. Enough to quiet the ghosts that haunted him, at least for tonight. If you're still with me, take a moment to like this video and hit that subscribe button, so you never miss what happens next. Pour yourself a cup of tea, settle in, and know that Ethan's story, and Claire's, is only just beginning. Ethan did not sleep that night. He sat on the porch with his revolver across his lap, listening to the wind whisper through the dry grass. Memories of the two riders circled in his mind. They would return, he knew, and with more men next time. Morning came, pale and unforgiving. Claire was awake, eager to flee again, but Ethan reminded her, "Running won't save you. They'll track you no matter how far you go." Her eyes searched his. "Then what's the plan?" Ethan thought of Harlan Briggs, clever, merciless, and respected. Only he could enforce temporary safety. They rode together across the wide open land to Harlan's stronghold. The town was noisy, dusty, chaotic, but all parted for Ethan Cole. Claire stayed close, heart hammering with every step. Inside, Harlan's silver eyes assessed them. "Ethan Cole, I thought you were gone," he said, leaning back with a grin. "I need your help. There's a girl." "They won't let her go," Ethan replied. Harlan's gaze sharpened. "And why should I care?" "I remind you." "You owe me," Ethan said firmly. Harlan considered him, then nodded slowly. "All right. She will be safe, but this is the last time I intervene." Relief flooded Claire. For the first time, she breathed without fear. Ethan allowed himself a fleeting hope, the kind that flares and fades but warms a cold heart. Riding back across the crimson plains, Claire leaned on him. "Why did you help me?" "Because I once lost someone like you, and I won't let it happen again," Ethan said. The sun dipped, sky ablaze with gold and red. The Wild West stretched endlessly, harsh and unforgiving, yet for one night, peace reigned. Saving one fragile soul had quieted his own restless ghosts, and that, for now, was enough. So I leave you with this. How many of us carry guilt for things we cannot change? If given a chance to save one person, would fear and regret hold us back, or would we act? That was the question Ethan faced, and perhaps it's a question for all of us. Take care of yourself. Watch these stories in quiet moments, and remember, your health matters, even late at night. I read your comments and know many of you watch past midnight. Rest when you need to. Thank you for walking this journey with us.